Well, look up. No more running from the bad guy. I'ma stare him in the eye like, what's up?
You, PJ. I love it. I know that's yours, but I still like it. All right. And good evening again, everyone. This is Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss. Mwah. And thank you again for joining us on another episode of the Kiss Corner. If you are new, please, I thank you and welcome you for joining. Let me let you know that the Kiss Corner is a safe space for women who, like me, have come out of toxic personal relationships and are ready to put in the work to elevate to a higher version of themselves and releasing the levels of toxicity that have existed and that you have taken on and being in said relationship. So, essentially, that is the cornerstone of the Kiss Corner. So, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Again, thank you if you are joining me on Facebook Live. Give me those likes, those loves, those cares. Feel free to talk in those comments. If you are joining us on the Empowered Voices Network on YouTube, again, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. And, again, in those comments, hit us up. Let us know what you're thinking and get into the conversation. All right. So, without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. This month has been quite a bit for me as I'm looking at being with my mom because I'm living with her right now and noticing a lot of things that I never noticed before. But definitely, as I'm in this space and time in my life of still coming out of a lot of toxic emotions and things that have developed as a result of my former relationship with my children's father, I'm noticing some things that show parallels between some of the ways that I behaved in that relationship and how I see my mom behave, just kind of like in general and in the relationship that she had with my dad years ago. So, all of that to say, this is actually going to be, I focused on this all month. The last Sunday or the last week of the month, I lighten the load. And so this will essentially be the last segment, if you will, or the last episode where I am focusing on evolving past my mother's pain, but never without honoring her power. And so you'll notice that I have this different background because I'm in a different location. So pardon, my casualty as we go through this. Okay. So anyway, having said all of that, the title of tonight's episode is The Volume of Healing. And the tag to it is My Mom's Quiet Strength Has Become Part of My Blueprint to Interrupt My Yelling and not pass it on to our next generation. And so I was speaking with PJ. She's the executive producer of this show and the owner of Empowering Voices Network. And as I was kind of texting her really quickly, I stated that this weekend, in many ways, was very transformational for me on a personal level. And the irony, and I guess it fits that this would be the close of this topic in this month, as I'm looking at the parallels between myself and my mom, seeing some things that I didn't realize that I had learned growing up in my household that thus carried over into my own relationship, but now seeing how things that I do are impacting my own children. And having gone to my mom, really thinking that I'm just kind of venting off for a moment and receiving some advice that in the moment I did not want to receive, but realized that I needed to get over myself, stop taking things personally and listen to the wisdom of the advice being given. And so, that being said, I'm going to go into what more specifically what I've been talking about. I've had to do some disciplinarian work with my children this weekend. They're kids. I mean, nothing crazy, but for those of you who may not know, I have three kids. I have one son and two daughters. Both daughters have just celebrated their birthdays, one last week, one the week before. So now they are 13, 10, and 7. My girls are 10 and 7. Of course, that means my son is 13. Whoa, right? And so, anyway, um, I've had to put my foot down this weekend a bit, especially with my son and my oldest daughter. And I had to realize the power of my words, but not only the power of my words, but the impact and power of my volume, right? Because it's often, and I say this a lot, especially at school, but I've said this to my children as well, and I've grown up being told it as well. Like, it's not always in what you say, but how you say it, right? The how can take on a whole life of its own, and you can completely overlook the what, right? You can say hello in a very nasty, snotty, shoddy way that allows you to not even receive it, right? It can shift the atmosphere and the air in the room just from a simple hello, right? Something really basic, but again, it could very well be in how it's delivered. Hello, good morning is not the same as, yeah, hello, hello, okay, let's get it started. Not the same, right? So, all of that being said, I'm going to take you through a bit of my journey this weekend. And I guess it's this generational mama mode, right? From my mom to me and me to my children. And so I'm going to start tonight by saying something I wish I'd said out loud sooner. And that is, like I said, I've been focusing a lot about my mom. And I just want to say that I come from a woman who knows strength in silence. And I've had to learn strength in my voice. Now, that's not to say that she hasn't over the years gotten better with hers, but my mom still very much so operates a lot, though, in silence. And so, like I said, I've had to learn the strength in my voice and get better at using that strength. And I have, but I'm coming to see that I still have a lot more to learn and a lot of ways to go. Why is that? Because sometimes my voice, mm, coming out of a 16-year relationship where a lot of that time wasn't so great at all times. And I'm not saying that that means every relationship is peachy cream all the time. It's not. But there were a lot of toxic things that happened over the years. And so I come to realize in a lot of ways, and again, this really came to light again for me this weekend, that the voice I learned was that of how to yell in order to survive. And like literally, I didn't always yell because I was angry. I yelled because I had to learn to be heard. Mostly again by my children's father, right? I had to talk over drunken rants. I had to shout through slammed doors. I had to be louder than the nasty words that were spoken in attempts to embarrass me, in attempts to shame me, in attempts to break me, and to break my spirit really at its core. And one of the things that I've now noticed is that even now that I've left out of that relationship for nearly 2 years, is that yelling, right? That way of communicating, it didn't just stay in that house with him. It stayed with me. And it's become in some aspects ways of how I then communicate with my kids. And to be perfectly honest, as obvious as that may seem, right? I did not recognize it for a while. I noticed it really last year. And so I've been working a lot to do better, but I'm not perfect. I never claimed to be. And so, like I said, there's still a lot that I have to learn. I've noticed that it became or has become a reflex for me, especially when I'm tired, frustrated, overwhelmed, or just plain scared. At times, when I really start thinking about the amount of change that we've all had to go through. And I have my moments really of feeling like perhaps I failed them, and having made the decision to make the move in the way that I did, you know. And so, when I think back to growing up with my mom, right, she would fuss definitely when necessary. I can't say that she didn't yell per se, but I know I don't readily recall her yelling, especially not as I got older. And like she didn't name call, my mama can cuss, but she didn't cuss at me. um, she didn't try to swing on me. She would spank, but outside of that, and everybody has their feelings about spankings, but it wasn't anything that ever went any further than that as a kid. And she didn't even go that route often, even when she probably had reasons to do so, right? Because that definitely was a disciplinary go-to for her. Um, but as I continued kind of thinking about this silence, right? I realized that one of the things that my son and I confronted this weekend was the fact that he, like most kids, you tell him to do something. Okay, maybe I tell you once, I tell you twice. All right, maybe I tell you 3 times, but come on now, past that, like you're just ignoring me, right? And so over the last couple of weeks, it's been a lot of every day, we got to go more about this phone and how when you get off the phone, and he has braces and all the work that you need to do at night to get your mouth right and floss your teeth and this and that, and I'm spending all this money, you got cavities, like bruh, we got to pull this thing together. um all of these things, and there was always like these subtle pushbacks. Stuff would get done, but it would get done 30 minutes later, 40, 45 minutes later, you know and I noticed it. I can't say that I really said anything, right? I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. But what was the problem with that? The problem was that lack of communication, once I did notice that this was becoming a habit, I should have nipped it in the bud then. And much like how I operated in my personal relationship, I let it fester, I let it go, I let it go. And then when he finally, Friday night, or no, early Saturday morning, he was up looking through his phone or whatever at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, nah, son, go to bed. And instead of going to bed, it was this pushback of, well, I was asleep and I just woke up and now I'm looking at my phone. What does that have to do with me telling you to go to bed? And so he was supposed to go and visit with one of his friends Saturday at noon. Another friend of his and mom had agreed to come and pick him up. And so since he didn't go to bed till after 2:30, I didn't say anything. I was like, okay, I'm gonna let this brother get up whenever he decides to get up. Well, what happened? He woke up after 12 o'clock. Well, by then, because I didn't want the other child's mother to come and waste her time to pick him up when he was clearly still asleep, I texted her and told her not to come. and also that he was not going to come over to this other friend's house, right? Because now I have to put my foot down. And he was asleep, and I'm in the kitchen making breakfast for the kids and myself, and I was like playing it through my head because he wasn't going to go anyway. But I'm like, yeah, I know he's not going to wake up soon, so I'm definitely going to let this rock, right? And just like I thought, he wasn't able to get himself up on time or anything like that. And my mom had come into the kitchen while I was cooking. And so I said to her, all of these things, and I'm like, and I'm really upset. And so now I'm like, I'm going in, like, I'm upset to the point of tears because lately I've been like physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, more so than I feel like I should be. And so, yeah, I am going to get that checked out. But I was just like, everything was just coming to me, right? All of it, this night, that night, and then it was this, and then it was that, and da, 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 da. And in short, my mother kind of looked at me and was like, yeah, I've noticed that you've been like running ragged, right? Taking the kids hither and yon and this and that. She's like, but at the end of the day, he's doing no more than what you've allowed him to do. Now, was it well received for me in the moment? Not really. But I had to check myself. I had to sit back and eat my little humble pie and pull up my big girl panties because I was with her. I'm like, he not doing this, he not doing that. I'm taking this, I'm taking that. And she was like, that's really just gonna dig a deeper hole, right? Use your village. Use this time to vent, but don't come at them like the way you're doing right now. Because I'm not gonna lie, that was my full intent. I'm like, I ain't gonna blast him as soon as he get out the bed, but shortly, not much after, like, boom. This is listen. This is what. And so by the time he got up and got things moving and whatever, and we had to go through this whole round about why he was not going to the friend's house, and he could accept the fact that he understood, rather, the fact that, okay, I overslept. It's not your job to have to wake me up. But he was really upset about, like, well, mom, like, you're so upset with me. And I never knew that I was doing all these things. And so it made me think about how this happened in my relationship with their dad, and how I was constantly being silent, but yet collecting notes, right? Taking these mental receipts about all of these things that were aggravating me. And without saying anything in between, before it just felt like this huge buildup, and then one little thing happens and bow, right? Now you just pissed to the height of pissivity. Yeah, I made up the word. And and so now you just like you just in like mode, like everything is and you want to scream and you want to yell. Now, again, this is me, right? I'm speaking about myself. Maybe you can relate to that, maybe you can't, but I'm just sharing this is where I was coming from. And I realized, like, I didn't grow up in that type of household. Like, stuff was happening, but when I look at it from the perspective of my mom, like, I realized where she might be ticked off about something and she would fuss, but she didn't yell. you know she'd have her moments. We all human. But she wasn't cussing us out, and all this type of stuff. And I'm not gonna lie, I would have my moments with that, with my kids, not just with their dad, and particularly with my son, because I always felt like, no, I gotta stand my ground. Like, you're not gonna run over me. You bigger than me now and whatever, but that doesn't mean anything. Like, you're gonna show me respect. And I get all of that, but at the same time, he's still a child. He is my child. And he's learning the same way any and everybody else is. And so are my daughters, right? And so all of this, when I tell you that this month's theme of I'm evolving past my mother's pain, but never without honoring her power. I can see that multi-layered. I can see how my children, in their own ways, are doing and saying the same thing about me. And that was a hard pill to swallow. But yet, I mean the statement with every fiber in my being, and I don't mean it in a disrespectful way at all. I'm unpacking both of what was said during my upbringing and what wasn't, unlearning survival patterns that I didn't even know I had passed down, becoming more intentional about the legacy that I'm building. One where strength isn't just about silence and voice doesn't have to have a mean volume to it. My mom's power wasn't just what she's endured in her lifetime, it's in what she refused to replicate, right? My dad was no angel, but I will say, for as much of the rah rah as he would give on his end, she didn't replicate it. And that's part of the legacy that I want to carry forward, is not having to replicate the yelling, the screaming, the hollering at all times and at all costs just to be heard. That's the part that I want to carry forward. And of course, not just for me, but for my kids and for the woman that I realize I am still becoming. So let me tell you all how these cycles are showing up, right? Again, not in theory, but in real everyday life for me as a mom. My oldest daughter, she started recently like play hitting, right? She's 10 years old and they're playful slaps, but again, they're slaps. I mean, with her brother and one of her brother's friends, like slaps to the face. And so, of course, that's not only too rough, but it's also a violation and it's a mini echo of abuse. And so I have stopped her and spoken with her to correct her. But at the same time, I see her, right? What do I mean by I see her? I see that she's replicating in part some of the things that she saw between me and her dad. And so now I'm being sure to intentionally speak with her and teach her that love doesn't hit, that play should feel safe and not painful, and that even when something is meant to be fun, it still has to respect somebody else's body and their boundaries. Because she's very much so about respecting hers at all costs and making sure that any and everybody is doing the same in regards to her. And so it wasn't very hard then to show that as an example that you have to then do that for others. So we're working on that because I know she means it as a playful act, but it's not. And then, like I said, there's my son, right? He gets upset, particularly when he is upset with me, because he'll feel that he is being unheard. And so his go to is to yell. And yeah, he is yelling at me. And I said, it's my son, right? He is yelling at me. And yesterday, this happened yesterday. And as we were talking, he says to me, well, that's the only way that I know how to be when I'm angry. All I know to do is to yell or scream. And he was sitting there like shaking and closing his fists in the moment. And I had to sit there and accept part of that to myself. Like, you know what, Cassandra, he's not lying, right? That's what he saw growing up. a lot, or at least more often than he ever needed to see or to hear. His dad was yelling. I was yelling back. We were yelling to, over, and through each other when those moments got like that, you know? Then, though, when his dad and I would come to a point of sitting down to talk things out, and it would happen, it didn't always happen, but occasionally we would try to sit down and have this come to Jesus discussion, right? My son never saw that, right? Us working to do better or to keep from getting to a point of having to yell and scream and berate one another, learning better ways to communicate with each other without going that far, right? He never saw it because it never happened. And then there's my baby girl, my 7-year-old. When she hears confrontation, whether it's me fussing at her or her siblings, or even her siblings quibbling at each other, and sometimes they're even doing it playfully, she'll cover her ears at times and she'll run away and she'll kind of cower. And so, even though we're no longer in a place where she sees the physical abuse, she and her body clearly still remembers what she felt in those moments when there was all of this tension in our household. And so these observations, right, have led me to a question of what happens when you grow up in silence, but then you develop a relationship and have children with someone who only hears you when you raise your voice. What happens? I can tell you what happened with me. You learn to yell to survive. You start believing loud is the only way to be heard. And you carry that into motherhood, into your home, and into your children's nervous systems. So that's how I ended up here this weekend, really realizing that my yelling at my kids isn't just about their behavior. Now, I didn't yell this weekend. I didn't. Because again, now I'm sitting here, and as I'm talking to my son and I'm hearing him and I'm looking at him and I'm realizing everything that he's doing, everything that he's saying, and at least he's being honest in what he's saying. I may not care for the delivery, but I had to hear what he was saying. And I had to acknowledge my place in it. That yelling, that was a survival habit. And it was a residue of years that were spent in a toxic relationship, right? Where yelling felt like protection and where talking back became self defense. Where my son would beg me, like, Mama, please don't say anything. You just gonna make it worse. And out of love for my son, I would go quiet. But the damage was already happening. He was watching me yell just to be heard. And now, when he's upset with me, his go to is to do what? To yell. Why? Because that's the model we unintentionally gave him. Right. And so, with all of these things happening with my daughter doing the hitting and all of this, what I see is that I have to teach him and my girls a better way to function as communicators, even as I'm still learning it myself. This is what I have to do. I have to break it. And not by pretending that things never happen, but by helping them to know and understand that anger does not have to come with fear. Disagreement doesn't have to mean danger. And that emotions don't need to erupt in order to be expressed. I'm not just repeating, I'm reflecting. And now that I'm aware, I'm also repairing. My kids are starting to come to me, and this has happened again over this last week or two in various situations, and saying, my daughter, mom, I didn't like how you said that. Or my son, hey mom, when you said or when you did such and such, it made me feel bad. And that is sacred because it's part of the shift that's necessary. They are using their voices and not waiting. Because I know that as a kid, I didn't always have that language to speak. And I definitely know that as an adult, it wasn't something that I was able to do very well. And then there's the evidence of it that was in my relationship. So while I'm evolving past a lot of my mom's pains, I'm still using her strength, her dignity, her grace, her refusal to match dysfunction with dysfunction as my compass. I'm not raising my kids by beating them into submission or taking away their joy until they obey. I'm learning that consequences, boundary, and conversation are much more powerful than fear. And believe it or not, it was my mother who brought that back to the forefront before I had to speak to my kids and handle different situations, particularly over this weekend. So, what do you do? Right? What do you do when your kids are showing some signs of trauma that you didn't mean to pass down? You reparent, you apologize, and you listen. You stop the behavior in yourself and in them, and then you replace it with something better. So I don't want my daughter to believe hitting is a way to show love. I want her to learn boundaries, respect, and gentleness. I don't want my son to believe that yelling is the only way to be heard. I want him to trust that his voice matters, even when it's calm. And I don't want my youngest baby to cower in fear, because she is truly fearless, but not always, right? None of us are. But I don't like the way I'm seeing it play out with her, because I've seen it multiple times before, and it was in the midst of chaos. I want her to be able to speak up and to ask questions and to feel okay to say, Mommy, this doesn't feel right. And so, like I said, they're doing it. They're holding me accountable with their words. And I have to let them know that what they're saying is acknowledged. It is true. It's brave. I hear you. I give the apologies. I acknowledge my imperfection and what I plan to do better, and that we have to do it together. So I want you to think about a pattern that you're breaking in your parenting or in your relationships that no one taught you how to rebuild. So you can put it in the comments, or you can say it out loud to make it real, right? Maybe it's, I don't yell like my parents, I pause, then I come back. Or perhaps I don't spank, I explain, then I follow through with consequences. Or maybe yours is, I let my child tell me when I hurt them, even if I didn't mean to. Whatever it is, say it, right? Because naming it, that's the first step to not passing it down. So before we go, I want to speak life over all of us. So you can say it with me or type it in the comments if you need to claim it, whatever works for you. I can break patterns without breaking my family. My children will know peace, not pain passed down. And if you don't have children, then I want you to say this one: my legacy will be peace, not pain passed down. My voice is powerful even when it's calm. My children deserve peace, and so do I. I deserve peace. So I need you to know, please, that tonight's episode is sponsored by Empowering Voices Finding Strength in Survivors. If this space has spoken to you this evening, if you are on your own healing journey, trying to raise kids differently, or simply to love differently, or just be differently, right? I ask that you sow into this work. I am inviting you to stand with me in a mission that is personal and powerful because this network is changing lives, and your sponsorship helps us to continue this work. Lifting up stories, offering resources, and reminding survivors that their voices matter. If you're watching live, the link where you can go to make a donation or select a sponsorship package is showing soulfulresiliencejourney.online, and it should be scrolling across your screen. My Facebook viewers, if you'll find that same website link, again, soulfulresiliencejourney.online, it is pinned in the comment section. So please join us. Sow into healing. Be part of a movement where pain becomes purpose and silence becomes strength. Empowered Voices isn't just a platform, it is a movement. It's a lifeline for women who are finding their voice after trauma, for mothers trying to break patterns after leaving toxic relationship, for daughters learning how to love and where necessary to let go with peace so that their sanity can remain intact. Your support makes all of this and even more possible through this network. I thank you for being with me tonight. I know I took a little bit of your time, but I really thank you for honoring your own journey while walking through mine. This work is not easy, but it's worth it, and so are you. So I will see you next Sunday, same back time, same back station. Next Sunday, we're going to lighten it up. We're going to play some games and we're going to get into some laughs and just let our hair down, right? So until then, stay tender and stay true. And as always, please continue to elevate as you move along your healing journey. This is Cassandra Williams, aka Coach Kiss. Mwah. I thank you for joining us this evening on the Kiss Corner, and I look forward to seeing you again next Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a good night.